Nevertheless, let's bring in Sean Spicer, now a man who knows plenty about Donald Trump. He was the former press secretary under him some years ago. Sean, good to have you with us on the program today. Thank you for your time. First of all, let's start with Kamala Harris and your reflections on what she just had to say at the lectern.
I'm just glad. I mean, look, it's nice that she did it, that she spoke to President Trump. I think there's a little sense of a lack of awareness as to what happened last night. But I don't want to look. I'll just take the victory. How's that? I think there's a tone deafness in the comments about the message that was sent. To your point, this wasn't just a victory, right? She barely won New Jersey and Rhode Island and states that are heavily Democratic, heavily blue, that turned out close to 60% for Joe Biden. Close. Virginia was close, 51.8%. Loudoun County up in the northern part of Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C., a county that we looked at early last night and said something's not going to go well here because she should have been running up the score. My point is, like I said, I don't want to dance on her grave. She lost, she conceded. But at the end of the day, the problem right now is that there's a tone deafness with some of these folks that doesn't recognize the rejection of not just the victory of Donald Trump, but the rejection of their ideas. And again, so if they don't want to get it and they want to move on, I'll just take the win and move. But it's unfortunate because I think that there's a lot of issues where there's some agreement on, for example, securing the border or getting back to issues that would curb inflation that aren't necessarily partisan, but more common sense, something that Donald Trump talked about. And it's just hopefully the sting of the loss is what's guiding them now.
Yeah. So we'll eventually get to Donald Trump. I just want more on this, though, because she talked about bringing the nation together, and she said she was proud of the campaign that her team run, but there was some pretty divisive language. I mean, there were claims of fascism, and Hitler was referenced by her team on more than one occasion. I mean, there's not much togetherness about that, is there, Sean?
No, there's not. And that's why, look, I think this was an opportunity. I feel challenged here because I don't want to, like I said, more than anything, I want to acknowledge that she conceded and that we're going to move on and we're going to focus on Donald Trump and what he's going to do for the country. But the reality is that it's devoid of reality on the campaign they ran. Politics is tough. It's a contact sport, as we like to say. There's a lot of names thrown around, but to pretend that somehow they were trying to bring us together and unite us after calling people who supported Donald Trump some pretty vicious names. President Biden the other night referring to us as garbage. Both sides did it, so I'm not getting. But to not pretend that that's not raw is just misreading the room.
So let's get on to Donald Trump and this extraordinary story. It's been claimed, and it's not wrong, it's one of, if not the greatest political comeback stories that's ever been. There's been indictments, convictions, attempted assassinations on his life, and here he is as president-elect. I mean, what do you make of that story?
Look, it's been 100 years since America's had a choice like they had last night. Donald Trump was easily able to say, it's not about hypothetical propositions. Literally, if you like what you saw when I was president, vote for me and J.D. Vance. If you like the last 4 years, domestically and internationally, vote for her. You don't get to do that very often in America. It's like I said, it's been a century since we've been able to do it. And it was an easy vote for a lot of people who said, maybe I wasn't 100% there, but I know what I'm buying. And I know what the world and what the country was like under Donald Trump, and I'll take more of that.
So what are you expecting over the next 4 years? And there won't, of course, be another term after that. So what do you think of the future of the MAGA movement? Will it be in the safe hands of J.D. Vance? Does that continue?
It's a great question. It's one that I've wrestled with myself. So I only chuckle because, we're here hours after this historic victory, and we're already talking about what it's going to look like in 4 years, right? I think it's a great topic. I'm glad you brought it up. I have a documentary where I talk about the rallies and the people who supported Donald Trump and where do they go. I've been wrestling with this myself for a couple of years. I think J.D. Vance would be the front runner of the movement, but I think Donald Trump himself said just a few days ago that we probably can expect a spirited primary after the end of this. But I think what we've done is recalibrated a lot of politicians, especially on the right, that we expect results. We expect them to put America first policies front and center in their campaigns. And we want to see a fight in them. We don't want them to roll over and to make excuses. And he's really reshaped not just American politics overall, but really what we expect and what we see on the right.
Yeah. Sean, you're obviously his press secretary for a while. Just for our audience, what is it like to be his press secretary?
God, another great question. It's challenging. It's intense. He's a guy who likes to speak for himself. So if you're going to speak for him, it requires constant checking in, nuance. He's very particular about the words that are used, the phrases, the imagery, unlike anyone else I've worked for in 30 years in politics. So, look, I've always said this. Donald Trump's probably the toughest boss that I've had, but he's also been some of the kindest. You always know where you stand with Trump. He'll yell at you when you screw up, and he'll praise you when you do well. You always know where you stand with him, and I've seen it on both sides. I've been on the sort of the bad side and the good side, and it's tough when you're on the bad, but it's great when you're on the good.
So what advice would you have for his next press secretary?
Stay in touch with him. Make sure that you're up to date. If you're going to go out and say he believes in something or he, has a position on something in particular, make sure you're checking with him. Make sure you're checking with him on a regular basis. And if things shift policy-wise or, events, then go back in and make sure that he's still he's still there where you thought he was. Don't make assumptions on what he thinks he's supposed to, what he should, or you think he's going to believe. And that was some of the things that I dealt with, where I made assumptions about things that I thought he believed based on previous conversations. But he's a guy that talks to a lot of people. And so you better make sure you know where you stand at all times.
All right, Sean, good to have you with us this morning. Thank you so much for your time. We'll chat to you again soon.